Hi, babies. Those who are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. Romans chapter 8, verse 14. So I'm feeling into all kinds of unknowns and uncertainties right now. Why don't you come along and have some fellowship in the mystery with me? Because our subjective experiences in our church attendance and our sanctification processes do not constitute the fellowship of the mystery. We are experiencing the lead of the Spirit, unbeknownst to ourselves, in the midst of all of our conflagrations. Even when we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, even in seasons where we're up to our eyeballs in shadow work and all the unknowns are assailing us. So let's just embrace all that unknownness. It's like deconstruction. It's like this path of, I'm starting to really own deconstruction, and just as far as coming out from the religious paradigm and the conditioning in our minds, the environment that we put around us in order to, this is the place where you need to be. Like when I first had my initial encounter with Christ, it's like, okay, I'm going to jump into Pentecost and I'm going to start speaking in tongues and I'm going to start passing tracts out in the inner city, which is all well and fine. However, jumping to conclusions about a subjective experience and going to a place, a controlled environment, where that this is that, so I go here and you're going to start clocking in as your fundamentalist Christian now, and so you go to church, and I my questioning in these paths that I've been down lately, I've gotten to a place where I've just completely said big fat no to evangelicalism. I cannot identify as an evangelical anymore. Now, this has been in the coming, you know what I mean? I've come across some foundational theology. I've come across places where there has been a corruption and a straying from the gospel, the true gospel. And, that the linchpin for me actually was a soundbite by R.C. Sproul, casting God basically as our enemy, that Jesus came to actually save us from God. And that was it. I posted a video on social media not too long ago. I think I'll post it again. I'll put the link in the description here. But R.C. Sproul is so wrong, so steeped in Calvinism, casting just this monstrous image of the Father. And I cannot fellowship in that. That's not fellowship in the mystery. That's a fearful motivation that is gripping people to, stay in the straight and narrow and remain in their controlled environment, and not necessarily venturing out into the uncertainties and actually having fellowship in mystery with others that are likewise walking by faith, which sometimes brings us through some dark stretches. So I have, gotten to the point right now where I am looking at that religious institution that I come out of, and it's been a process. It's been slow in the coming, but I mean, eventually we get to the place where we have to really opt for the authentic, and the fellowship of the mystery sets us into a place where we don't know what we're being taught, where there are things that the Lord is bringing to us that's outside of the parameters and the paradigms of our evangelical conditioning or Catholic conditioning or fundamentalist conditioning or what have you. And it's like, I cannot check the clock. I cannot just rub shoulders in these certain environments anymore, just because there's a breadth that is outside of that paradigm where God is. And so, I mean, in Jesus' day, in that religious system, these people that were, under the law and subject, all the history of Israel and, the glory years and exile and the regathering and the building of the second temple and then the rise of the Pharisees and the Babylonian corruption that happened after they came out of exile. There's a lot of baggage that came on Israel after they came out of corruption. So there was a religious system that was existing at the time where Jesus was preaching in the red letters to the people in that culture, in that context. And so in Matthew chapter 10, verse 6, he says to his disciples, I send you out in my name, preach the gospel, heal the sick, cleanse the leper, cast out devils. And he said, go to the lost sheep of Israel. So there's a specific call when Jesus is sending his disciples out there, go to the lost sheep of Israel and declare the kingdom in the midst of the lost sheep of Israel. In other words, they've got their religious system, and it's no different today. They had their religious system. They had their prescribed, protocols according to the Pharisees in Judaism. And Jesus was really upsetting the apple cart, and he was casting an image and an invitation and a reality of the kingdom in the midst of these that was outside of that religious conditioning and that religious paradigm. And it's no different today. When I'm looking at evangelicalism, and especially, this conditioning from Calvinism that's come down the pike and conditioned and literally traumatized so many of yous because of preaching like R.C. Sproul's preaching. It's like there needs to come an invitation. There needs to come a place where we come to where there are those that are sent in his name to cast out devils, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers. And when he sends his disciples out, when he sends us out, what I'm facing and what the reality and how Matthew chapter 10 is converting into a modern day reality, a paradigm for us, is that we need to evangelize the evangelicals, ironically, because there's so much of this religious baggage that I'm noticing that I can't fellowship with anymore. It's not the fellowship of the mystery. It's controlled and contrived, and there needs to be something coming along to eject us out of that mindset. So it's not for nothing that then, further on in Matthew chapter 10, gosh, what verse is that? Hang on a minute. Matthew 10, and he sends them out, and they do their wonders. They go out in his name, and I'm just blathering here as filler while I turn pages. And 16. I'm sending you out as sheep amongst wolves. So the paradigm, the call, the context of chapter 10 of Matthew is basically go to the lost sheep of Israel, go to these that are steeped, that are God's, that are the elect, that are the focal point of Jesus' ministry is actually reaching out to the Jews. And he says, go to these lost sheep of Israel and declare the kingdom and show the wonders forth in their midst so that they can be ejected out of that religious paradigm of Judaism. And then this is so ripe for where we are today. I send you out as sheep amongst wolves. Therefore, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And so in my reconciling of fellowship, I mean, there are others with like faith. There are others that I know that have the fellowship of the mystery. There are others that I know that as far as those that are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. And when you're led by the Spirit of God, sometimes there is a deconstruction. There's a walking through the valley of the shadow of death. There is embracing a lot of shadow work. And these precious ones need to hear the liberating message of the gospel to eject them out of that religious context. And Jesus brings it right down here. I mean, so many evangelical crusades and, motivational messages from church pulpits come across, I send you out as sheep amongst wolves. And like case in point today, it's like when people take that verse today, it's like, well, we have to go out and basically rub shoulders with LGBT and all these left-wing lunatics, or radical Islam and all of the things that are the elite corporate ruling class. It's like, these are the wolves that we go forth to rub shoulders with, and we're going to make a difference in the midst because we're going to rub shoulders with these. Those are the wolves. We're the sheep, and we're going to go into the midst and declare the kingdom and make known the good news. The context is not any of those things. Anybody that's not living according to our agreement or, preferences. He's sending them out in the middle of a religious context. I send you out as sheep amongst wolves. In other words, I'm sending you out into the midst of the lost children of Israel. So he's sending them into the midst of a religious system. The context of Matthew chapter 10 and preaching the gospel as sheep amongst wolves is actually embracing that religious context and being in the midst of it and not compromising and broadening the paradigm of their limited thinking, their dark minds, their inability to turn and to embrace the fellowship of the mystery and to start walking by faith and being affirmed that they are sons of God because they are walking by faith. So I said my fill, and I'm just looking at this and pondering this for myself personally, especially because I've been out of church for so many years. I've been deconstructed. I've been chewed up and spit out by the religious system. And I still have fellowship with a lot of different Christians. And I get invitations to do stuff. And I hear, that there's this going on or that going on. And I've been quite vigilant that I'm not going to go to a place where, or it could potentially be hurt, where the religious traumas of my past could be triggered. But at the same time, there is an embrace of this in a place where we're going to come and start embracing the fellowship of the mystery again. So I said my fill, and I'll quit speaking filler now. But we are coming out from church as usual, and we are coming to a place where we're going to start being the church and not relying on our, where we think that we fit and what our religious protocols are. We're going to start pitching stuff out the window and sticking our necks out and maybe ruffling some feathers, but actually walking in the Spirit, affirming that we are the sons of God. And, even in places where there's mystery or questions, people scratching their heads, or I'm up to my eyeballs in shadow work. It's so easy when we're stuck in our preconceived preferences and notions to, that's sinful. It's like he's backslidden, It's like, well, whose heart's growing, who's being led by the Spirit. It's like those kind of charges and that kind of insecurity and those kinds of fears that are projected against people that don't fit the mold anymore. It's like that after a point that kind of just falls off. And you learn to disassociate other people's fears and not empathically pick up on them anymore because they don't apply to you when you're actually hearkening to the Spirit, being led by the Spirit and being affirmed as a son of God, even in the midst of the lost children of Israel, even in the midst of being as a sheep among wolves. The church, the religious system, we need to evangelize the evangelicals. It's not a gotta have to, but there are precious ones that are in the midst of churches and in different paradigms that need love, and our hearts are being broadened to embrace even these. So, love you a whole lot. Have a wonderful day. Just wanted to clarify something about potentially having fellowship in the midst of, as a sheep in the midst of wolves, in that, when you're truly deconstructed and the paradigms, the doctrines, the dogmas, the fear-driven performance that's by and large in evangelicalism, if that doesn't apply to anymore, I'm really sensitive. I've gotten to a place where, I have fellowship with church people, for lack of a better term. And there's small talk and there's some testimonies that can come out, but as far as like real authenticity and where Jesus is really meeting you, it's like there is a cutoff, and there is a place where we no longer start feeling safe to be vulnerable in the midst of a lot of Christian circles. And if your behaviors don't line up, if your doctrines don't line up, sometimes if your church attendance doesn't line up, and sometimes if you're not tithing enough, you're not measuring up. And there's this calculation system amongst the wolves where, you cross a line and there's an emotional trigger. There's a mind bug that's operating in the hearts and the minds of a lot of church people. And this is why it's dangerous, because especially with the doctrine of eternal conscious torment. I mean, that is a mind bug. There is such a fear sewn into a lot of people's minds that, I mean, if you cross a line, you're going to, get the left foot of fellowship. You're going to get, a correction letter. You're going to get disfellowshipped. You're going to feel rejected. And I mean, you extend your heart and you supposedly have fellowship, and you go through the rituals and the small talk and stuff with a lot of these Christians, but you start getting to that place where you're actually becoming authentic, and the fangs come out, and there's a mind bug that gets triggered. And there's, if I ascribe to that, if I went down that path, it's like, well, hellfire may be waiting for me, like this person. They used to be a Christian, they're backslidden now, but I don't want to go down that route. And so I just need to basically make a plug for this, and let me just say this concisely: that we need to take hell off the table, because when that eternal conscious torment, when that monstrous image of God that has been especially cast by the doctrine that's been passed on to us by John Calvin, Calvinism is mind rot, and when we hold to that, and we start calculating this person's elect, this person's not elect, this person's performance isn't measuring up, this person's backslidden, this person's gone off into false doctrine, this person's new age, blah, 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 blah. It's like there's a trigger of a mind bug that occurs that prevents the actual expression of authenticity and that fellowship in the Spirit that we really ought to have. So I just blathered, and it's put a lot of filler into the first part of my message here. And I forgot to put this part about Calvinism being mind rot and eternal conscious torment being a mind bug. I forgot to include that, which actually defines wolves, which is important to the context of the whole first part of my message. Again, I love you a whole lot, babies.